So the fallout in Virginia continues, where you had the governor who was accused of possibly being in blackface. Then you had the person who would take over from the lieutenant governor who's been accused of sexual assault, and then the person below him, who's also a Democrat, is admitted to painting himself black to look like a rapper. Curtis Blow, who's a fantastic rapper, by the way. And so, if all three of them had to resign, a Republican would take over. So, it might shock you to hear, as a Republican, I'm actually against any of the three resigning. Now, the one that might have the best case for resigning is Northam, not because of the blackface photo to me, but because he bungled the apology so bad. I mean, he almost moonwalked, which is ridiculous. Plus, I find his abortion of comments more offensive than the picture or anything like that. But even him, I would say, I haven't seen enough for me to want him to resign, based merely on that. And certainly the guy dressed as Curtis Blow, I wouldn't want him to resign. And even Fairfax, I think he should be given the benefit of the doubt. And until he's proven to have done something like sexual assault, I don't think that we should judge him for that, and he shouldn't have to step down. Now, this video, I want to focus on these sexual assault allegations and predominantly the double standard. I did a video on Fairfax before, and these allegations as they are just coming out, but there's been some updates. So in that video, I didn't know at the time that it turns out that Fairfax has admitted to having a sexual encounter with this woman on the night in question. His claim is that it was consensual sex. She claims it started off consensually, and then he forced her to perform sex acts against her will that would constitute sexual assault, possibly even rape. I don't know the exact laws, but a very serious. What's ironic about this is I'm going to be talking about the double standards of how some people are approaching this, but it's ironic how similar the two situations are. In fact, in almost every case, the situation to Kavanaugh I'm talking about, in almost every way we could look at it, this is very similar to the Kavanaugh situation, except a little worse. So when we talk about, it's an allegation from a long time ago, except it's shorter time frame for Fairfax than with Kavanaugh. And the person who's accusing is a professor in both situations. And that person has hired the Katz law firm in both situations. And both Fairfax and Kavanaugh hired the exact same lawyers to represent themselves. I mean, it's really, it's striking how similar these two situations are. And yet we see a complete double standard by leaders in the Democratic Party and by the mainstream media that acts as the mouthpiece for them. Now, I will be doing a video later, as I've had some of my Democratic friends say, one of the problems they have with my videos are the way I title them, and I make it look like it's all Democrats. I'm not doing that. I'll explain that later. I'm talking specifically, I don't mean you that might be a Democrat that's sitting at home. I'm talking about the leadership of the Democratic Party and the mainstream media that acts as the mouthpiece for the establishment Democratic Party. Those are the people with power, and it's important when they're acting as a double standard. We should call out all double standards, even for like lowly people like me or anyone else. But it's doubly important that we call out these double standards when they're enacted by people with power. So let's take Cory Booker, for example. I saw a video yesterday where someone's puts a microphone in Booker's face and says, "What do you think of the allegations against Fairfax?" And Booker says, "Oh, right now we need to focus on Northam and the need for him to resign. I know you people want to deflect from that and talk about something else, but..." Now that's a far cry from the Cory Booker we saw at the Kavanaugh hearings, who was saying that Christine Blasey Ford was a hero, coming forward with her truth. And that's what's important. We need to shine a light on things like sexual assault, and it's always one of the most important things we can do. So what's the difference now? Oh, because it's a Democrat. And especially because it's a Democrat and a Republican might take over if all these people are to resign. So now the standards change. Now it's not believe all women. For someone like Cory Booker. It's the same with Kamala Harris. It's the same with Dianne Feinstein. It's the same with all these media people. Now all of a sudden it's, well, wait a minute, it's suspicious the timing of this, and there's other things to focus on, and, whoa, that wasn't the story with Kavanaugh, right? Where are the calls to look at Fairfax's yearbook? Where are the calls for FBI investigation? Where are the calls for him to step down? Where are all the people saying, we know he's guilty? Where's Hirono, the senator from Hawaii? Where's her take on this? Now, some might say, well, yes, but the Supreme Court position's a more powerful position than the governor of Virginia or the lieutenant governor of Virginia. That's a terrible excuse. This is still someone in the national spotlight. This is still someone with power. What are we telling victims of sexual assault? Right? Like the Democrat, these establishment Democrat people, the leaders in the party and the media, they've been on their moral high horse under Kavanaugh and said, we need, we need to encourage women to come forward and all this, and especially against people with power. What's the lesson if you're a woman now? Hey, if you're going to accuse a Republican, you're a hero. Come on out. We're encouraging you to come out and accuse. But if you're going to accuse a Democrat, then we're basically going to say that it's just a deflection and ignore you. We've already seen this with the woman who accused Keith Ellison her former boy, or Allison's former girlfriend or lover, she accused him of beating her. The media wasn't all over that. The Democratic Party wasn't calling for him to step down or FBI investigations. That was different. And she said she feels like, even though she's a lifelong Democrat, that she's being attacked because she deigned to go against someone who had power in the Democratic Party. Well, here's another lesson. So if you're out there, ladies, keep in mind, depending on who abused you, you might be considered a hero if you come forward, or you might be a pariah if you come forward. Because if, God help you if it's a Democrat that abused you. You don't want to come forward then. That's the lesson that the media and the establishment Democratic Party is sending. Is that really the lesson we want? Now, let's look at the journalists in particular. Like, we had the Washington Post that we know sat in this story for a year. The reason was they couldn't corroborate the allegation. That's fine. That's what real journalists do. They hear a story, they try to corroborate, and they don't smear someone's name unless they can independently corroborate the story. But they had the exact opposite reaction when it came to Kavanaugh or other stories. For example, there was a story in 2014, I believe, or maybe even prior to that, where the Washington Post ran with the story of Mattress Girl, who was this girl that walked around campus with a mattress saying she was raped on this mattress. Turned out there was no corroboration of that. It turned out to be a false story. But it didn't stop the Washington Post from running one. It didn't stop the Washington Post and almost every other major media outlet from running every smear they could about Kavanaugh. Not just Christine Blasey Ford's story, but then stories of him being a gang rapist. Stories that had to be retracted about him getting in a fight on a boat because he sexually assaulted someone, or sexually assaulting a woman in a car, or aggressively sexually pushing someone up near an ATM. All those three stories had to be retracted. But it didn't stop the Washington Post. They didn't corroborate any of them, but they ran with the story. And the same with all these other media outlets. So it just goes to show the double standard. What's the difference? Republican versus Democrat. That's the difference. And it is exactly as I and others said during the Kavanaugh situation. This is the weaponization of sexual assault claims. And it actually hurts real sexual assault victims. And it actually encourages kind of a witch hunt mentality where innocent people that aren't committing sexual assault are now just prejudged and are judged as guilty before innocent. And I would never vote for the Democrats that were pushing that, because it is a foundational idea of this country, of the individual, that you are innocent until proven guilty. You are afforded due process. And we had Booker and Feinstein and Kamala Harris and Hirona and many people in the media that were out there saying, no, Kavanaugh is guilty until proven innocent. Believe all women. And I was like, this is a terrible standard. This will eventually be used against the Democrats. And no one wanted to listen, just like I constantly say in the Mueller investigation. Are you going to be happy? Like, if you're a Democrat and you're cheering for this, are you going to be happy when Trump uses opposition research to have his FBI spy on his opponents, and then it appoints a special counselor to raid their lawyers' offices in the middle of the night, it stacks them with a bunch of Republicans, etc.? No, you'll say this is the actions of a dictator. This is terrible. And so, again, here we see an example of the warning gone unheeded. Now, a lot of people, to their credit, that are actual not the Democratic leadership, but would vote Democrat or at least lean left-wing or liberal, are saying, yes, the treatment should be exactly the same with Fairfax as it was with Kavanaugh. Now, some of them I think are misguided and wrong, and they think both are guilty until proven innocent, or they should both resign or something. I'm on the other end of that, but at least they're consistent, not like the Democratic leadership. Now, there's a couple other things worth mentioning. First is there's a guy's name, I believe his name's Bobby Scott, who's a representative in Virginia. He apparently knows of this victim and also sat in this story for a year. That's a really bad look. Again, this is from the party that supposedly is telling you that the Republican Party doesn't take sexual assault seriously, etc. Well, here we have another person in the Democratic Party who heard a credible allegation of sexual assault from someone they say was kind of a friend or an acquaintance of them that they kind of had no reason to distrust. And again, this isn't like this woman's a Republican and she's coming after a Democrat. Like, at least in the Kavanaugh situation, we saw Ford was someone who leaned Democrat and was going after someone appointed by a Republican. That's not to say she's guilty, but in this situation, we don't even have that. We have someone who's a Democrat calling out another person who's a Democrat. And yet this Representative Scott sat on this information. Now, am I saying that he should have went to the media with it? Not necessarily. But he maybe should have went to law enforcement. He certainly should have went to leadership in the Democratic Party, which maybe he did. But if he did and that leadership didn't take it seriously, that's even worse. So either Scott himself sat on this, which is bad, or the Democratic Party sat on it, which is bad. If they're taking these allegations seriously, they should have came out open with it and said, there's no corroboration of it. We're going to stand behind Fairfax, but we are going to take the allegations seriously and we're going to encourage an investigation. But they didn't do that. Now, let's look at the specifics as to what's going on with this situation versus the Kavanaugh situation. It's very similar, except that it's even worse in this situation. So in the Kavanaugh situation, again, it's not just a matter of the accusers have both hired the same law firm and the defendants have both hired, the accused, I guess, have both hired the exact same law firm. And both the accused were professors, and it was both from years ago. But it's more than just that. So, for example, in the Kavanaugh situation, Ford didn't know an exact time or place. The people she gave as witnesses, even her friends, couldn't corroborate her story. There's no proof that Kavanaugh and Ford were even at the same party together, let alone that they had even a consensual sexual encounter, let alone a sexual assault. His sexual assault, which was serious, was that he put his hand over his mouth and started to grope her. That is very serious, don't get me wrong. Now, let's juxtapose that to the Fairfax situation. Now, we see how the media isn't covering it with as much fervor. We see how the leadership in the Democratic Party, like Booker, is saying, now we don't need to focus on. This version is, we know for a fact, admitted by both, that they actually did have sex. We know that it was on the exact date and time and place that was given by the accuser. We are just told that the Fairfax says that it was consensual fully. The accuser says that it started off as consensual and then he forced her to perform sex acts that might constitute rape. That's even more serious than what happened with Kavanaugh, what he was accused of. Again, that's not to downplay what Kavanaugh was accused of. But this is a step further even. He's alleged to have actually finished the act of the sexual assault or rape, whereas Ford escaped before that could happen. If that story's true, thank God. So why wouldn't this situation be deemed at least as credible, at least as worthy of discussion? And it's obvious. It's because the parties of those affiliated. And it's even less likely to get traction now because the Democrats know that they've already said blackface is a reason to resign, which again I disagree with. So that would mean the first and third in the Virginia party have to resign. And now the second, if they take this allegation seriously and have the same standards they did with Kavanaugh, he would have to resign, which means a Republican takes over. And they're not going to do that. This is exactly what I've said all along. It's easy, like they threw Franken under the bus, but that just meant Franken got replaced by another Democrat, so it wasn't a big deal. But let's see when the rubber meets the road, where if you throw someone under the bus and then it means there has to be a new election, or it means that there has to be someone from the other party to take over. Will they still have, the fortitude, will they still have the conviction to say it doesn't matter, sexual assault's wrong? Well, where are they? We don't see them. And another thing that's terrible, remember, all the people that said, in the media and Democratic leadership that said, Kavanaugh, the way he forcefully defended himself, that's reason enough for him to resign. How dare he? This woman's someone, she's a victim or an alleged victim, and he needed to treat her with respect, even if he doesn't think that her story is accurate. And I was like, this is nuts. The only reason he's so fired up is his public image has been destroyed in front of his wife and children. Like, that's terrible. I would have reacted with far more intensity and vigor than Kavanaugh did. So here we have two news sources have reported that, and we've seen Fairfax came out and be pretty forceful in his denial and say that there was no truth to it. There have been two corroborating reports that have said that when Fairfax initially heard this, he said, F that bitch. That seems to be coming pretty forceful out against the accuser. Now, I would say if he's innocent, that's probably the reaction you would have. Just like you would have the reaction Kavanaugh had. So I don't think that's a judgment of his guilt or innocence. But for all the people in the establishment left, Democratic leadership and the media that said Kavanaugh's reaction proved that he was unfit for office or that he was guilty, where are they now? It's just more the double standards. We need to stop this weaponization of sexual assault claims. Again, all this is doing is making it so if you're someone who has an accusation of a sexual assault claim against a Democrat, you're now scared to death to come out because you'll be a pariah. You'll be ignored. But if you come out against a Republican, you're a hero. You'll get book deals. You'll be considered Woman of the Year in some circles. It's absolutely disgusting. Now, I'm not saying we need to go back in time or anything like that. I'm asking people right now on the left, right, center, or unaffiliated, can we just set the standard? Go back to what this country was founded on. Innocent until proven guilty. I have no love for Fairfax or the Democratic Party, but I even defended Al Franken. I'm tired of these witch hunts. It's doing no justice to actual survivors of sexual assault or victims of sexual assault, and it's doing no justice to the country in whole. It's literally making a system where our politics is just replaced by who could get the bigger accusation against the other person. And it's disgusting. I'm not trying to play sides with it. I am biased. I do think the Democrats are worse. I think they're showing a double standard. Not all Democrats, but those in the leadership in the mainstream media. But I don't care. I'm less interested in revenge. Aha! Now let's take down Fairfax. Put the Republican in. This is what you deserve. No, I don't want that. Let's just end this madness. It's gone too far. That's my feeling on it. So, hey, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. I'll be doing a live stream like I do every Friday, though it might be at 2 o'clock instead of noon because I have some work obligations. So, all right, everyone, thanks, and have a good one.